Alex, according to the latest New York Times polling, it looks like Donald Trump and Joe Biden are neck and neck, both at 43% going into the next election. This is after a number of indictments. We're expecting any moment now, perhaps a third indictment against the former president. And you don't have to guess as to how he feels about this war and how to bring it to an end. He says so anytime he gets the opportunity, including over this past weekend, where he sort of resuscitated everything that led up to his first impeachment, and that is a quid pro quo with Ukraine, withholding aid in exchange for dirt on the Biden family. Well, here's what he just said a couple of days ago. Listen.
Joe Biden is compromised. He's dragging us into a global conflict on behalf of the very same country, Ukraine, that apparently paid his family all of these millions of dollars. In light of this information, the U.S. Congress should refuse to authorize a single additional payment of our depleted stockpiles, but the weapons stockpiles to Ukraine until the FBI, DOJ, and IRS hand over every scrap of evidence they have on the Biden crime family's corrupt business dealings. We have to know, and the public deserves to know. In addition, Congress should immediately vote to block Joe Biden's recent call-up of reserve forces. We're sending now troops over to Europe to fight.
Okay, well, we are not sending troops over to Europe to fight in this war. But, Alex, there's so much we can get into in what he just said. But specifically in terms of withholding aid, we already know that he said that if he's back in office, this war will come to an end in one day. How are comments like this received in the Kremlin, and how do you expect they're received in Kyiv?
I think that the Kremlin definitely hopes that Donald Trump is back in the White House. Of course, we witnessed that despite Trump's inclinations to make deals and be best friends with President Putin, the sanctions pressure on Russia has mounted. And during Trump's administration, some lethal aid has been supplied to Ukraine. But this time it might be entirely different. And obviously, getting rid of Joe Biden is one of the jackpots that Vladimir Putin hopes to strike. In Kyiv, obviously, that increases a lot of nervosity. If this team is gone and there is an entirely different team, there is a lot of bad blood between President Zelensky and Trump. Who knows how vigorous and efficient the U.S. support for Ukraine will be. And that's probably where the Congress can actually play a role, authorizing a long-term program for supporting Ukraine.
Well, we'll see where Congress, and specifically depends on who's in control of Congress, who they would ally themselves with. I mean, for the most part, you still see overwhelming support for Ukraine and continued support for military aid. But Karen, as you said, a lot is riding on this counteroffensive, whether that is something that's fair or not. And I'm curious if you think that Europeans view things turning perhaps in 180 here, that early in this war, it was the Americans who were decisively supporting Ukraine, and the Europeans were a bit reluctant given their economic ties to Russia. And some are suggesting that perhaps the tables have turned now and that the Europeans have changed some of their behavior and their strategic alliances. And now we're concerned about where the United States stands longer term.
Yeah, right. I mean, of course, the UK has always been all in. In fact, in some ways, the UK has leaned in more than the United States. I think the U.S. appreciates the way the UK has done that. But you look at France and you look at, you were talking about off-ramps earlier. I mean, Macron was early on saying we need to not humiliate Putin. We need to give him an off-ramp. And what does Putin do? He humiliates Macron in Mali. And Macron's forces have to leave, replaced by Wagner forces, by Russian mercenary forces. So I do think that some lessons are being learned by some of the Europeans that were perhaps trying to be a bit more even-handed earlier on. And so I think they are more nervous now about a Donald Trump and about, the U.S. ability to lead on this. I mean, the U.S. still is providing the bulk of assistance, but other European countries are helping in a significant way.
And Alex, Karen brings up the Wagner Group. I'm just curious if you see any impact from that failed mutiny by Yevgeny Prigozhin back in June in terms of how much time Putin views that he has on his side. Clearly, that was an embarrassment for him. Prigozhin still is around. We see pictures of him. He's meeting with world leaders, and so it has yet to be determined what fallout is to come for him. But do you see that impacting Putin's longer-term vision for this war in particular?
We don't see any meaningful cracks in the regime and in the way that Putin's system is holding grip on the Russian society and the Russian elite affected by the mutiny. Russians are now in the holiday season, and that's definitely yesterday's news. Yes, they've seen Putin procrastinating, delaying a needed decision, and emotional. But that's not a new news for many Russian people. And we also see that the regime is injecting more resources into targeting the critics and repressing them. For example, Igor Strelkov, the notorious commander, formerly an FSB colonel who was involved in staging uprising in eastern Ukraine and then bringing war to Ukrainian territory, was recently charged and put behind bars. I think that only strengthens Putin's grip on power at the moment.
Do you see in the interim, any opportunity for Putin to change the war leadership at all in terms of his defense minister?
I think that's possible. He definitely will not be doing that under pressure or because Prigozhin or anybody else isn't happy with his military leadership. And it also is a complicated task because you need to put a person who is competent but not overly popular and not coming from the army. You need an outsider, and that's what Mr. Shoigu and his predecessor have been doing for Mr. Putin. Putin is entering an election cycle. He will have an election in March next year, and then the Russian tradition is a government reshuffle. So that will probably be an appropriate time to change the leadership of the Ministry of Defense to somebody more competent, but also not too popular with the troops, not to create a rival or potential challenge for Mr. Putin himself.
All right, Alexander Gabuev and Karen von Hippel, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Really enlightening conversation.